Very warm welcome to all members of Isaka Delhi chapter. And this is Saurabh Singh, board member and your host for today's CP event. We are very grateful to the people who have joined and they are shown their eagerness to attend the CP event. Uh, we have these are second virtual event for the year, and the new board has taken over, and we will start soon. I'm giving you the details of the event. So this is the topic of today is application security and governance, and the rules are for 50 minutes if you will join 1 CP, and this is 2 hour session. So if you will join the full session, which I believe you will, then you will receive 2 CP for today's event. You can ask your questions in the Q&A box, and we will take those questions in between the session as well with the topics. This presentation deck will be posted on Isaka chapter portal and YouTube channel as well. Feedback forms you can share will be shared, and you can give your feedback. And there will be survey forms as well, which you will receive on your emails. You should give the feedbacks and survey forms so that we can improve with the further sessions or the requirement on the different topics. You members can opt, or suggestion can be opted for different kind of technologies or workshops we can conduct during the year. There are certain email IDs and WhatsApp numbers posted here. This deck will be shared, and you can note it down, and you can share your queries or suggestions or any requirement on these numbers, and we can give you appropriate responses on the same. So I'm coming now coming to our speaker, Mr. Saraswat, Pradyumna Saraswat, who is a leading expert in application security and information security field. He has more than 14 years of experience into different environments he has worked, and he is certified with certifications like COVID, PMP, ISO 27001, and he has experience into various fields, starting from ethical hacking, then securing the environments, maintaining compliance, internal audits, and compliance and reviews. He's currently working with Ameriprise Financial as a lead information security, and he maintained different portfolios there. So today we will hear from Pradyuman with respect to application security, how to maintain, how to govern the different controls or the requirements, maybe regulatory or internal to the companies, or different aspects of the application security domains. Pradyuman, I hope you are with me. You are able to hear, right?
Hey Saurabh, yes, absolutely. Can you hear me back?
Great. Yeah, Pradyuman. Thanks for joining, and a very warm welcome to you for today's presence. You have taken time on this weekend, and you are going to share the knowledge with us and the members of Isaka New Delhi chapter. So, a very warm welcome to you, Pradyuman.
Thanks, Saurabh. And thank you so much for such a warm welcome. And I would also like to thank for all of our members and the participants who have joined this session today. I believe that this session would be, quite fruitful, where I can share my good experience and few of the good best practices from application security point of view, and which definitely, can gauge you and provide you little more insight that you already know it. So I think we can begin and we can start the journey, right, of this session.
Fine, great, Pradyuman. I believe you can share the screen, and we can start. I believe it will be 2 hour session. So in between we will have some polls so that people will be engaging with us, and we'll take the Q&As in the Q&A box. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Over
So
to you.
if you can confirm, Saurabh, that my screen is visible.
Yeah, very well. I'm able to see that.
Okay, great. Okay.
Well,
Yep.
yeah. Fine,
Please go
fine,
ahead.
Pradyuman. I will be interjecting with you with respect to different queries, or the different aspects which I believe supposed to be discussed for better understanding, and we will take the Q&As as well in between. Fine, Prady.
Absolutely.
Just start. Yeah.
Absolutely, Saurabh. Yes. So we will definitely look into the respective questions. I will only request all of our members who have joined the session, please note down all your questions and where we can use our Q&A section for that. So yes, absolutely. Okay. So I just would like to start a little bit of the information security and the respective component of it, right? And before we go, I just would like to give you a quick view that what is the today's agenda point and what exactly how this session is going to be like. To begin with, I do have a very interesting slide, and I hope you all would able to correlate with this slide, because this is kind of a daily news that you all might have seen in the various platforms with some frequencies, right? So this is just a zest of it that you see, and this is the combination of all the cyber attacks or the breaches which has happened over the past years and the very recent it took place, right? Uh, we will talk on these little in the use cases in a session later, but before we move further, just would like to give a little gist of it, right? So like we know, LinkedIn hacked with users personal information, including name, geography, address, phone numbers, and other social media details, right? And because of all those breaches, LinkedIn has to add 330 million users, who were using this application. Their data was breaches. Not 330, I'm sorry, it was almost around 700 million users whose data was published, right? Whatever the social media information was available into uh, uh, the LinkedIn account that they were using. Similarly, the 330 million users of the Twitter, and especially that was a Twitter who told their customers and to their users to change their password after when they discovered a glitch into their password management system, right? Dub smash, I think we all know these days, and especially in the COVID times, we used to do a lot more media content creations, right? So Dub Smash is kind of a media content platform. So the Dub Smash also experienced a hack where uh, the customers or the users' data were exposed to the internet, right? And last but not the least, the Equifax. The Equifax is the well-known American credit card scoring, organization which provides the loan based on the credit card scores. Like we do have a civil in India, it is equally has this Equifax in America or the US itself, right? So uh, I would like to ask, what does these breaches means, right? So yes, definitely they means the heavy financial losses in terms of the multiple fines as well as the loss of brand reputation and ultimately loss of their customers, right? So we all know when all such breaches happens, the respective authorities, governments and organization, they make sure that the privacy of the customer or the data which was breached, it has to be equally equivalent, right? So and especially, what do you think? What's common in all these breaches which would have been happened, right? What the first thing which comes in your mind? What is that possibility, right? So it's just a combination of security misconfiguration, some basis or basics application sanitization miss, which was missed at the time of when the application was being developed, when it is being deployed, and when it is being in use into the production, right? So and especially when the people who were responsible for application for doing the validation and the testing itself. So it was a miss, though it was a very small and as well as a large level of the miss which was happened at the time of um, you know applications in production or whether this is being developed. So dear friends, today we will discuss the importance of application security and its integral part of security assessment components, right? And I hope this session will be interesting, and it will give you a little more insight on the application security part of it. So I will try to be as much as crisp as well as more valuable to all of you. So these are the agenda points for our session today that you see. We will begin with why application security, why we need application security, right? We heard this security everywhere. Then the definition of the terms. Definitely, when we are talking about the security, we will also have to discuss about the definition or few terms of the security, which should be always in use, right? We will move into foundation of the security. What is the basic foundation of the security which is being used in terms of application security? Then we will move to application security assessment, that what are the key components that we can take care of whenever we do the application security assessments, right? In the fifth, we gonna discuss the respective and relatable governance related to application security part of it. And last but not least, we're gonna have a Q&A session where you can, ask all of your questions, whatever queries that you had at the time. We can definitely put our best to give answers to whatever queries that you have. So quickly, I am moving to our first agenda item, which is why application security. Okay, so first thing first, which comes in our mind that everywhere we heard about security, right? So what's special in this application security that we do, right? So software applications, basically whatever applications which are being developed in an organization to be used by its users, internal customers, external customers, clients, right? It is very important to understand that the software applications are integral components of an organization's success, right? So whenever we talk about software applications, they are the integral part of the organization, and it plays a very vital role. Unfortunately, while applications are built to support faster growth, right? Because business would like to use absolutely fast of their application. Nobody would like to wait to use that service, rather whether it is halfly baked in or the security was not tested in full. Business always would want to use it, right? Same time, it equally important to understand and enhance the user experience as well as the security component of it. So it is very important to understand the security component while the application is being developed, and why it is being tested, developed, and why it is being productionized to be used into the end users, right? So there are so many of prone security incident which has happened, which we have just seen in the early start of a slide, which definitely kicks in the appropriate security mechanism which is required to protect our information, which is correlatable and relatable to our applications, right? A very interesting fact, right? I would like to give you, as per the recent search, approximately 84% of, you know, such application security or cyber security attacks were carried out in the application layers, right? Because these are the layers which are very prone to be exploited. And I would say, especially in the COVID times, we all were in homes, we all were in house, and there was so much of the infrastructure uplift that we saw, even the small scale of the companies moving towards cloud, right? Moving towards digitization, moving towards their on-prem to post-prem, right? When I said post-prem, I'm always meaning it for the cloud, right? So it is a very adoptable model for small scale business to the large scale business. We will discuss a little bit more in our further slide, but this is just a quick stance I would like to give. So in this session, we will see how application security plays a vital role within the organization, which safeguard the company's assets, data, and the brand image, right? Because we also have to evaluate the brand images. If any of the application gets breached, it's not only the application which is breached, it is also the company's image, brand image is breached, right? And there would be hefty of the penalty which can be imposed by the various central government agencies or the respective compliances, right? And to end with this, I would say security is not an end; it's just an ongoing journey, and we have to keep on engaging ourselves with an ongoing journey to make this security better every day. Okay, we will quickly move to the definition of terms. I'm pretty much sure we all are absolutely aware about this definition of term, but I just would like to give you a little glance of it in terms of the application security, right? So, like we know, there are many kinds of attack trends, including but not limited to passive and active targeted, right? So, which means threat plays a major role. for any of the breach, right? So threat is nothing, but you can understand that threat is considered as an act of coercion. So when I said it is an act of coercion, it means it can potentially available exploitable or a threat vector which can give you a combination of surface attacks which can be applied on the existing vulnerabilities, right? Towards vulnerabilities, it is nothing but this is just a weakness which can be exploited by the threat vector. I know these all terms are pretty much known to all of you, and I would not take much time over there, but because this is the security and we should not, leave these terms behind, right? So attack, again, attack is an intended action which has caused a damage to the system or the asset itself, right? So it is equally important to perform a risk evaluation for all those assets, application, and the infrastructure which is available right there, right? So risk evaluation is just the set of process which is used to compare the estimated risk against the given risk criteria, right? Like you can see, there's a very interesting diagram, and there's a reason that I kept it there so that it give you a little bit of correlation in a real time world, right? So as an organization, and as an whether it is a large scale or whether it's a small scale organization, it is our responsibility to calculate our risk, right? To calculate the probability and the respective impact. Why it is important is because uh, if the risk is too high or the risk is too low, we can categorize in a way that the security controls can be implemented. And accordingly, our business and accordingly, the budget which is being allocated to the security can get the prioritization. So this is one of the very great examples that we can see, which you can correlate in your day-to-day, daily lives as well. Okay, so we are moving to foundation of the security, that like why the foundation of security is the important pillar, right? We all know CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It is very important to understand these terms in terms of application security as well, right? So authorization is nothing but authorization is just a process of recognizing a user and its identity, right? So I'm having my ID and passwords. I can use my ID and passwords to log in into an application, right? So that is called an authentication. But after logging into that application, what level of access I do have to perform certain operation, that is what we call as an authorization, right? So it is very important from an application security standpoint to implement these control and these segregation points in between, right? Because any of the misses in terms of implementing authorization and authentication can definitely lead to a potential risk and potential vulnerability which can be exploited by the threat or attack vector, right? Confidentiality is something which is absolutely meant of restricted for the user who it's supposed to be. Any of the individual who should not supposed to access any application data or information which is residing to its primarily application or the asset of the application, it should not be accessed by unauthorized by any means. That is what we calling here is in confidentiality is also an equivalent important factor here, right? So integrity, it's definitely it's one of the key component in our application security and even to this foundational security pillar as well, because integrity is just a concept which ensure there is no unauthorized alteration was being done at the time of when the user is trying to use that data, right? So it is always to make sure whatever data it is being used, its integrity has been maintained. There is a sanity check, there is an integrity check which has always been implemented so that the unaltered or unauthorized alteration can be stopped at any moment. And definitely the applicability, right? I'm sorry, not applicability, it's availability. So availability, which means authorized subject which is granted and an interrupted access to the object. So whenever you would like to access any of your applications asset databases, right, it should be available at the time where it is needed. So on demand application on demand, availability of a service that you are using, it should always be available to be used and to be consumed. So these are the major basic pillars that we always need to keep in mind, whatever development, whatever implementation stuff that we do towards securing our companies values, information. These are the pillars that we always used to follow as a 360-degree high level view. And over the past decade, we have seen application security has emerged as a critical component of the business IT, right? Because everywhere we heard about IT security and other security part of it, right? But the application security, we have seen from the past decades that it has emerging in altogether different way. We have seen so many of different teams which has been created, which has been built, even it is a large scale business or a small scale business. We have teams like red team, web application penetration testing team, who specifically do take care of application security aspect of the testing itself, right? So yes, definitely, security is something which keep on evolving, and which keep on evolving at the time itself. So yes, this is the need of the hour, as it always. Okay, so like we all said, and we have already seen that uh, what is the importance of the foundation of the security is all about. At the same time, it is also important to understand that the business and IT framework have become more complex day by day. When I said more complex day by day, there are a lot more applications that you see. There are a lot more APIs. When I said APIs, I will describe it later, but there is a lot more third-party application APIs that you use to your day-to-day, business applications. And in the terms of agile or the agility framework, we want everything to be used at and on the spot itself altogether, right? So buying decisions for these applications, whether it is a third party provided application or in-house grown application, definitely it's a realm of IT itself, right? And the complexity of the software development have definitely increased. We have so many secure coding standard that we use as of today to safeguard our applications for the various known threat or attack vectors or the known vulnerabilities, specific CVE that we will see in a later stages too. But definitely organizations are pumping up and they are having better budget for their respective teams, which are especially looking after on the application security component of it, right? And at the same time, that I believe that as a result, many organizations are also looking to adopt a governance framework that increases protection and decreases risk. So whenever you have all these standards, policies, procedures, you have the respective governance, you have some compliances, some sort of some law which is specific to a land. It is also important you should have a governance framework which can govern all these aspects in under an umbrella, which is deemed important for an organization or definitely for a steering committee or strategy committee start point, so that it can be reviewed at the time when the security is being discussed or it's being componentalized. Okay, so before we go ahead, we do have a poll available right now. So I appreciate all of you to use our poll section. So Manisha or Saurabh, if you can quickly help with the poll option there. Saurabh, Manisha, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, Pradyumna, poll is already there and started.
So I can quickly, we can give at least the 2 minute of the time for um, to complete this poll. I'm just sharing my screen. We're gonna have 2 minute of the time to complete this poll, and the time starts now.
So we have, because this is 2 hour session, we have kept two polls in between. In the poll, on your screen you can see a poll section, polls, and you can see the query there. You can give your answer, maybe yes or no, and the result will be published after that. Pradyumna, we have a question as well where the context is about confidentiality. However, the query is audit trail is the only option. Is the audit trail is the only option to verify that only authorized users have access that particular application database? So is the logging or logging is the only option, means to identify, or there are proactive mechanism available or tools or any other mechanism which can identify if the access was authorized or not?
Yes, so good question, and I would like to answer. Definitely, one of the way is to audit trail, enabling the audit trail. And another, available option would be the sanitization of the application or the security check of the application while it is being used. And especially, you can have the specific access which is being designed for any application to be used. I'm sorry, I will have to stop this first, otherwise it will keep on ringing. Yes, it is. It is. So whenever we are defining and whenever we are developing an application, it is equally important to understand what triggers at the time of some unauthorized access has happened. We do have some preventive measures also available, which can act as an detection of the unauthorized access too. There are so many of the live incident monitoring that you can do if any of the application is or the user is trying to log in with unauthorized access, right? So if somebody is try to constantly log in into application and getting failed, there is a team who constantly looking into those events and monitoring and specifically blocking those access respectively.
Thanks, Pradyumna, for the answer. And we have the poll result, which says the query was: a strong password is enough to keep the business safe or not? And we have 18% people voted for yes, and 84% people voted for no. Pradyumna, if you want to cover this in a little elaborated way.
Yes, sure, sorry, definitely I will do. So I would say a strong password, only having a strong password, can safeguard us is it's a good assumption. Yes, it is a good assumption, but it is not the real time scenario cases, right? Because we know only having a simple password set up for your application and somebody is having your password available to be logged in can breach your information, right? So we do have multiple more ways to protect those accesses is for two-factor authentication, right? Or multi-factor authentication is a way where you can safeguard, where you can protect your application, whether it is being accessed. There are some logic which is run behind it. You might have seen few of the application which also asks for questions which you have set up at the time of your application when you have set up your first time login to, right? So those are the multi-factor authentication that you can always enable at your application. This is a recommended and preferred approach for all of the application which is being used within the organization and having a sensitive data out of it.
Yeah, correctly said. I believe this is the requirement, mandatory control for most of the standard or the frameworks we follow. And Pradyumna, we have another question, but I believe you are going to cover that in the further uh, slides. The question is what strategy to follow for legacy applications. So you can cover it later if it is going to be.
Yes, so for legacy applications, we definitely cover that part that it is, a very difficult whenever we move our legacy application to new kind of an application security model. We do have, a few areas that we are going to touch base and talk upon in our later, sessions altogether. So are we good to proceed, Saurabh, or do we have?
Yes,
Okay,
Yeah, we should proceed. Yes.
great. Okay, so now we will quickly jump into the section which is application security and the respective assessment out of it, right? And I know, most of us already know what is application security and what we do as an assessment, right? At the same time, we know that to draft something, to, I'm sorry, to securing something, it is very important to understand what framework that we follow, right? What framework that we follow, which is a first step towards building it right, right? Because we always have a strategy which should be coupled with continuous monitoring to empower the organization, the leaders, making ongoing risk-based decision that the organization takes that affects the mission critical assets, right? We all know the specific business do have their mission critical assets, mission critical applications, or mission critical vision that they do have. So it is very important to at least get into a specific security framework, follow the best practice, and implement that on ground so that you can save your respective organization data, its integrity, and respective confidentiality out of it. There is no hard coded standard I would say you should use, but generally for a security standard we have seen, and the industry best practices has been seen to use NIST standards, right, which is based on 853, or you can also use 837 as well, right? So an efficient application security mechanism basically requires a combination of tools, right? This is very important to understand. This requires a combination of tools and practices for identifying, remediating, and preventing security vulnerabilities, right? Because when we have all these terms, it is also understand that whenever application which is being developed, it is being developed, what life cycle it has been followed, right? It might have been followed a specific life cycle which is SDLC. It is very important to understand what this life cycle is all about. We will talk about the secure development life cycle in a later session as well, but just giving you a little bit of a background of the security assessment, that what we do. So by proactively fixing vulnerabilities, security team improves the application security posture, right? Since threats are mitigated before being exploited into the production. So before the best practice says, don't move anything into production if you are unsure what the development risk it has, what are the security risk it has with the codes. Always complete your full and rigorous security application security testing, then move your data into production, right? So modern software development primarily emphasizes on agility. We have seen so much of the term about agility, right? Everyone would like to you and go for agile model, right? They do not want to go for traditional waterfall model. They business need if a developer developing a code, in between changes was recommended. So the issue with the waterfall model, you cannot make that changes until that completely developed and go into before the production space, right? So agility is a model everybody would like to adopt. Then we would like to understand the respective security part of it also, right? So application security, on the other hand, blends security seamlessly into development as well as to operation workflows, right? It is very important to understand there are a development cost which is always involved. You do have your engineers, your developers who are following day and working day and night to securing that application using the best practices. So at the same time, it is also important to have a good amount of budget for your development team as well as your security team who can test their work before it is moving to the production, right? So application security assessment actually provides an assurance to whether it's an application designed to configure in accordance with security standard or the best practices, and definitely identify exploitable security risk, right? This is the prime key factor that we see to identifying the exploitable security risk, which is a value add to the team which is performing the testing out of it, whether it is the in-house application which is being used, or that is a third party application that we are using in accordance with the third party, right? So there are various security checks that can also be performed at the time when we use the third party application. We will also discuss that in a later session as well. So definitely improving the overall security posture. And last but not least, whenever applications are being developed and they are not properly hardened or tested, any unauthorized access or sensitive data can even harm or event permit full compromise of the underlying operating system. It is not only about the application that you use, it is the overall conceptualization of the container or the operating system where that application is residing. So it is not only pertaining to the application, it is also the ecosystem where the application is being used. So always keep in mind, not only securing the application, we also have other factors which we will see in our slides too, which is equally important to safeguard and to have an additional security eye, which gives us, the all security component enabled at that ground, right? We will talk about the compliance in the negotiations also in the further sessions. So, okay, so in today's technology world, business need to make sure their digital assets are adequately protected against attack. So it is not only about security responsibility, right? So we all heard this term, it's a securities responsibility, right? So anyone would like to know or have any issues, they say, hey, it's a security issue, go for the security team to get this remediated, which is fine. But security is everyone's responsibility. That mindset, that we need, which I also I've been seeing from from my various past experience, that now the team is owning that ownership of security. They know the basics of the security, and that what exactly it is required to securing an application asset before they are deploying any of the set or the code into production or to be used in the live environment.
So, Pradyumna, I have a query here with respect to uh, when we say assessment supposed to be done or mitigation supposed to be done on the identified cases. When in a SDLC model or particularly development uh, cycle of application, when security team supposed to be involved, or in what instances the assessment supposed to be done. So you have discussed about the breaches happen, and you talk about agility as well. So we'll cover those part maybe in governance section. But for now, if you can highlight a little bit more about assessment when it should happen, or if you are going to cover in next slides in the cycle form, we
Y-
can discuss there.
Yes, yes. Good question, Saurav. We also do have a specific slide which tells you what are the best way to engage your security. But just because you asked, I'll give you a very quick liner about it. So any of the step when you have decided, when you have started even strategizing your application, you should not delay involving your security team into it, whether it is architecting a solution, because security is something which can help you providing the best practices or the best industry standard which is available to be baked in from a security component, while the architect part of it it's being done. So I would say whatever step that you can think it is deemed important, whether it is plan, action, do, act, right? Like in a PDCA cycle, all in the software development life cycle, every step you should have the security baked in or bolt in, so that security has all full sightness whenever they would like to, yell, or whenever they would like to stance that, hey, this is something which is not being correctly done. It can be done at the same time, rather you realize or engaging security at the very end of your development when you are about to implement. So hope I have answered your question, but I will provide more details in the specific section that you have asked, Saurabh.
Yeah, sure. For the members, we would like to discuss maybe in detail about agility and security assessment and the responsibility of the security teams aspect in further session.
Absolutely, we're definitely gonna do that. Okay, so I will quickly move to this section, which was Saurabh's question as well, and definitely all of us would like to know that what is this at the time where I should involve our security team into a discussion, right? So uh, SDLC, which is the software development lifecycle, right? And in a security, we call it as secure software development lifecycle, which actually involves integrating security testing and other activities into an existing development process, right? Rather going to end of the stage when the development is being done, then you are going to involve the security. It is at every stage when you are working on a specific code or the development or to a rational, the security is just supervising and helping on the security component of it, right? So examples include writing security requirements alongside functional requirements and performing an architectural risk assessment, right? This is very important. So whenever you have your functional requirements that you get your business requirement that you get, and when you're about to do a performance on the architectural, it is very important to understand the risk analysis and during that design of phase of the SDLC, right? So this is uh, uh, you know a representation, a graphical representation, which will give you a more insight that what secure SDLC is work like. So you can just take it up from anywhere. You can just start it from the plan. Whether you are planning any development to be happen, then you do have your codes available. You are building your code, and then you are reviewing your code, and then you are doing a specific penetration testing and the test itself, and then you're about to go for a release management, and then you go for the deploy. Deploy is something that you perform an audit and the threat intelligence operations and monitoring of that services, right? So this is an ongoing exercise that we always follow in software or secure software development lifecycle, right? And whatever step that you see, right, security is actually bolted underneath, right? So security sees whenever you do have a plan, whenever you do have a source code, whenever even you are about to write those source code. Now we do have that intelligence or technology available whenever a developer is developing a code simultaneously, dynamically. A code is being scanned for a specific source code which is being written by the developer, right? So there is many applications, there is many tools right now available which can give you that foresightness and that dynamic results when somebody is developing a code. At the same time, on a different window, it is also showing whether it is secure coding or not. So security is something which is mainly objective or securing the software development lifecycle, and this is just to ensure that the security is built into the application throughout the software development lifecycle, right? And this is not something that you later realize that it is too late, for my application to go for a security testing or for the application security testing, because until that is being reviewed, it should not, ideally it should not move or readily available use to the customers, and that there will be or there might be a delay from the management who would seek the security approval underneath, right? So it is always important to engage your security at the time whenever you are having your plan ready, whenever you are having your architecture ready, whenever you are about to discuss your different application security aspect of it. So this is where we specifically look into secure software development lifecycle, which is recently, not recently, I would say, which is tightly built in into the application security component of it. Okay, I will move to this is the topic which is very dear and nearby to my heart as well, because this is the topic which basically talks about and helps an organization to maintain the respective confidentiality, right? Until we know what we are protecting and why we are protecting, we will not be able to tighten and we are not be able to implement the controls, right? It is necessarily not required to have your 100% security enabled for the information which is readily available for the public, right? Because it is meant to be available for the public. So rather to distinguish that definition, data classification is being used throughout the organization, which helps to lower the danger of unstructured sensitive information, which is also becoming vulnerable to the hackers, right? And it actually saves companies from steep data storage costs, right? You can also identify which data I require to store for a longer period for any of the legal and the compliances that is required. So data classification plays a very major role, and data classification is nothing but this is just a process of categorizing data into relevant subgroup. Why these subgroups? You will see it down below. These are the subgroups which are available, and which most of the companies, you might have seen three, some might have seen four categorization of the services, but these are the journal categorization of the data classification, which is mentioned here, which is public, internal, and confidential, right? Like I said, it is very important to classify all those data all together, right? So I will start with the very first bucket, which is a public bucket, which is a public data classification. That data is basically meant to be freely disclosed to be public, right? It's publicly available information that is meant to be disclosed into the public. We have so much of the information even in our organization, which is rightly available on our company's website, which is accessible through internet, right? Our company name, our address, even employees who do get their business cards. Companies have their press releases, their any of the concerts that they have done, right? So that is all the publicly available information which is being drafted under the public data classification, right? Then we have the internal is the bucket where the most of the security components kicks in, right? When I said kicks in, it doesn't mean that public doesn't have any control. It do have to identify what is public, what is internal, but internal gonna have more security controls baked in, right? So internal data that is absolutely not meant to be disclosure to the public, right? So internal data is company's information and the company's data, which should not go outside in the public, which has been made specifically to be reside in companies, networks, application. It should not go outside of the public without having a consent within the organization itself. So you can think of your company's policies and standard. You always going to see there is a watermark under it which says internal only, right? For a few of the slides that you have seen, internal only, because that is the categorization that you see, and it is very important to have that categorization or the classification available in all your data, whether it is related to any of the process document or any of the segregation of the document, or any of the database that you made it for, right? So whatever you are building, it is important to classify your data into these buckets. So it could have the company directory, policies, company's internal IP, DNS, and everything, right? Confidential. This is the third and the last bucket in the data classification that we are going to discuss. It is very highly and sensitive and the restricted data, which require explicit. When I said explicit, it is you require a deemed permission to access this data. And why is so? Because the risk associated with this data, right? The data that it contains is a very sensitive data, and even if that data gets compromised, right? Uh, you know, company may have to face the huge financial loss, or a legal risk, or definitely the brand image loss too. So in the confidential bucket, what we're going to see is we see PIIs, personal identifiable information, PHI, SSN, credit card number, client's data, employees, internal salary data is also confidential. It doesn't mean that if an employee working in an organization, his salary slip is internal. No, it is very confidential to an individual. Without having a consent, it should not be shared with anyone either inside of the organization or outside of the organization. Definitely the intellectual property, whatever the patents, whatever the trade secret that the company is building, it is required to have that bucketization available altogether. So these buckets plays a major role whenever you see application security and the respective security control build on it, because based on these understanding of your data classification, the controls will get applicable.
Right, Pradyumna. So, with respect to data classification, how do you see the responsibility of the application development team to ensure the information which is going to be processed by the application is classified, and at which stage is supposed to be, and by whom?
Saurabh, can you repeat your question again, please?
Yeah, I'm saying data classification is important aspect as we discussed and you elaborated well. At the time of application, development or maybe go live period, how do you see the responsibility of application development team to ensure that data, whatever the application is going to process, is being classified?
Oh,
within the buckets. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
get it. Absolutely. So, like I said, data which is getting classified, it's supposed to have that classification under specific bucket, right? And when I talk about classification of the data, we also talk about the segregation of a specific, environment, or the stages when developer is developing the information, and then it is being tested, and then it is being, QA checks, and then it is being move to the production. So we have all that segregation which is being maintained in the segregation of the duty area, which all of the organization requires to maintain a access level control, that what all developer do have access to. A developer who is developing the application do not have access to something which is in QA, or which doesn't have access to in production. So segregation of the duty is kind of a document which is being prepared for a specific application developers or the developers team, which do have their designated permissions and their designated duty and roles which they can only perform. We will also see this part in our upcoming slide as well.
sure, sure. Thanks.
Okay, so in a nutshell, we have such common applications, test methods that we can use altogether, right? And these are the best known, test methods that we can do to identify the specific application security risk or identify it, right? So, at all we know, we have so much of the applications which are widely available, which does provide too much of the insight of the source codes, what is being used, where the application is being used. Here we are categorizing the type of tests that can be performed on all those development set, right? So these methods are well known to all the organization, and respectively the efforts and the teams are gauging to get the optimum result from it, right? So the very first one that you see is the unauthorized authenticated scan, right? Which is nothing but which is just a unauthenticated scan or a report to find the weakness, right? Or to find a vulnerability from a public viewpoint. So this is kind of the scan which doesn't require an explicit ID or password for this application to go and test in deep, right? Rather, this would be just an authenticated scan to reconnaissance, to get if somebody not having the authorized access of this application, what weakness that can be uncovered in this unauthenticated scan. So this is a very first reconnaissance, and also the very important aspect which requires, because anyone having the scanning or the scanner available within the organization, or if somebody is using your application at outside or external expose, somebody is having these automated scanner can identify those publicly available weaknesses which can be exploited in a various combination of the threat vectors, right? Then we have authenticated automated scan, which is an enhanced, version of the scan and the reporting to finding the weaknesses which can be exposed to the unauthorized or unauthenticated users. I'm sorry, authenticated users, right? So let's suppose I being in an application, user, I do have my ID and passwords to log in, and what this application authenticated scan does is it scans the applications with the authenticated permission, with the right permission which the user is having to test, right, the right set of access, or what user can see above and beyond what is being developed, or what is being provided as per of the access of this application, or what all user can see other than his role level access which was performed, right? So authenticated automated scan is gives more insight because it is being done with the authentication, right? Then we have a penetration testing. I will discuss this more specific into a penetration testing slide, but will give you a little bit of information here too. Penetration testing is nothing but just a next version of something of doing a proof of concept, right? So penetration testing is something which performs over and above your security controls which is being implemented. So just validating all those controls and trying to evade those security controls controls and bypass those security controls and look into the application, how deep exploit can be done, and perform the same POC and give it to the management so that the respective fixes can be done. We will talk a little bit more on this slide as well, right? Then we're going to have a manual source code review. This is a very important subject. So like we all know, authenticated automated scan, unauthenticated automated scan, penetration testing, these all are the key component, as well as manual source code review is also important, because uh, we also need a human eye to find few issues which might have been scaped at the time of these testing were done. It could be the source code analysis on the basis of the best source code vulnerability exploitability available testing methodology, which is being provided by the OWASP test cheat sheet 2, and in accordance to whatever the business logic has been built, yeah, right, and what is uh, the backtrack path, or what is the loophole which is still available, which can be exploited, which can be reviewed by performing a manual source code reviews or the scan itself, right? Then we have the binary analysis. This is also a very important aspect, and this can be done by automated and manual too. So binary analysis is a type of code review that looks at file, composed of binary code, right? And assess their content and structure, all without the need of the access of the source code. So it doesn't require that you should have your source code. If you also have your binaries codes available, which is being used to be developed, or which is being used by the developer while the application is being developed, these binary analysis gives more insight of that application together. Okay, so so while we are moving to identifying the vulnerabilities and figuring it out, what are the issues available in our security, it is very important to understand few aspect of the scanning and few aspect of the application security testing out of it, right? Like we see authenticated, unauthenticated penetration testing, binary, and source code manual review too. We have static application security testing. Most of the team would, you might have also heard SAST scan, right? So SAST scan is nothing but this is just a scanning of your source code, which is being developed by your developer. They might have used the respective libraries. They might have used some source code. They might have used some third party source code, right? So this SAST application security testing gives you more insight on the coding part of it, right? So you can think of, you have 2000 line of codes, right? So based on the security standard and the secure coding practices, this SAST scan gives you the result on the well-known issues which are being identified at the source code level, right? So that is known as the SAST scan. Then we have a dynamic application security testing scan. This is what also very important to understand. When application was developed and when it was handed over to use to a team, and whenever you are using that application, right, that is where the dynamic application security testing is required. So you can test the application where it was in use, the dynamics of the application, that what is in use. So it is equally important to identify or uncover the vulnerability which is residing there at the source code level at the time of static scan, as well as at the dynamic application security scan too. I do have, a very good comparison graph, which will give you more insight. What does, SAST and DAST does specifically, and with the industry leading, practices that specifically, both of the practices do follow. So, like you can see, SAST is nothing but this is just a white box security testing. You have your source code. You can go into inside of your application. You get more information that how the application was developed, what all component was used at the time of security, the application development. At the other end, when you see the dash is actually the absolutely black box testing, right? And this is something which identifies the framework when the application was being built and whether the application was in use. So it scanned that, and which represent, so you can identify one application which is being used. It is also important to understand what are the threat vector that is also gauged there. So because most of the hackers approach is to testing the black box test, right? Because they do not have the source code. Rather, what they perform is a black box test where they do not have access to the source code. So this is how, a very important aspect to see the black box testing too. So, like we just discussed, SAS requires a source code to be scanned. However, and the DAST is something which requires an application in a running environment and the stages, right? And SAST, can find the vulnerabilities earlier in SDLC lifecycle. So when you get availability, you still have time to fix it, right? If you are using the SDLC at the right time, or whatever the model that you follow, agile practice, whatever that you follow, you still have your time to fix that within the time, right? But the dash scan can only be done when you have developed that application and you are integrating all that bits and pieces and releasing that application. So yes, the discovery definitely can be done, but it can be done majorly and componently on at the time of when the application is being developed, or not being developed, it is already developed and running in an environment. So it is at the very final stages and towards end of the software development life cycle why the application is going to be used. So SAST is very less expensive to fix vulnerabilities, because you do have, those scans. Like I said, now we do have plugins available. Developers at the same time can develop the codes, and the scans are being run, and they can check whatever the source code, which is not being right properly, supposed to be fixed at that time. However, the dashed fix and vulnerabilities are more expensive. When I said this is more expensive, because at the end of the SDLC, those are being identified, right? And when the end of the SDLC, those are being identified, you found this issue again, you will have to go to the back and plan that changes, right? Because they all were integrated at that moment, right? And then again, this is the reason it takes more time. It takes when I said expensive, it takes more time, it takes more bandwidth. If any of the critical identify issues it getting identified, it takes more time to be fixed. There are few limitations that we have with SAST, like we know, it cannot discover real-time environment related issue that can only be discovered by the DAST. So this is one of the plus point of the DAST that it does. So thumbs up to the DAST for that. And so typically your SaaS, scan do all kind of a software that you can think of, right? You have any web applications, you have any interfaces, anything that you're developing in house, be it any of the format, you have ASPX, whatever format that you can think of, you are developing in house. Your SaaS scanner scans almost like everything, right? However, Dash, do have some limitation, which do have some other type of software like ASPX and other type of a software type or the developer type that it cannot, provide support with. Though definitely they are also being extended their support, but I still believe it is far away from where the SAST provides the kind of a support to the application. So DAST is something which doesn't provide that much of an insight for uncovering those issues. So SAST and DAST techniques complement each other, and this is the reason that you see a handshake there, right? So uh, uh, if you have both of the techniques used in your application development, life cycle, this is the best way to identify your issues at the time when your application is going to be rolled out or is being used by the end user. So before it's being used by the end user, these are the practices which are supposed to be followed. So and these are the comprehensive techniques, right? You can go as much as deep that you wish to. These are the few points that I have taken it here, but you might have uh, you know uh, uh, know all other aspect which you're not seeing here, but these are the core components which are definitely required for SAS and dash implementation standpoint. There.
Yeah, Pradyumna, we have a few questions. If you can take them quickly as per the time permits. Uh, One question is DAST performed in pre-production environment
I'm sorry.
before the go live? So DAST should be performed before go live, pre-production environment, or or
So
in
yes,
pre-production.
yes. So
Yeah.
so DAST is something when you almost developed all of your component into it, right? So it is up to you. You supposed to productionize it or not productionize it. You can still keep that application in a non-production environment, right? You but still you need that environment to be set up and to be test into the DAST implementation or the scanning standpoint. So it necessarily or definitely is not required DAST to run at the time when your application is being or being developed into production. You always have a QA, you always have other stage where you can do the non-prod specific testing on all the application which is being done. The major difference between SAST and DAST is, which you will also see in a later slide too. We do have so many chunks in the application when we developed an application, right? There are so many other bits and pieces which supposed to be integrated for an overall application to be developed. So the best part of the SAST is it scans every chunk at the time when it is being developed, right? You develop the code, scan it, develop the code, scan it, develop the code, scan it. But DAST can only be performed when your application is up and running. It is not running at the chunk of the code which you have just written it up, right? So when you have the full application which is being developed or about to be ready, it is being ready to be DAST scan, then the DAST can be performed.
Sure, sure. We
and
can
and
proceed.
and 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 sort of moreover this is DAST we do moreover from finding the front end vulnerabilities. So whatever front end vulnerabilities can be uncovered, you can find from the DAST aspect.
Okay. Please, yeah, we can move on, please. There are a few questions we will take in the last.
Yep. So, though I am not going to recommend any of the third-party solution or any of the vendor, I am not recommending any of them. But yes, there are few industry, leading, I would say, service provider which provides a solution like I talk about. Uh, uh, a plugin which is available, which can constantly, keep on checking your code which you are developing as of now. So uh, Veracode do have that kind of flexibility available, and there are few third-party plugins also available which can be integrated with that component. So whenever you are having the browser-based development that you do, at the same time it gives you the results that the code or the parameter which is being used at the time of development, how healthy is that, right? If it gives you a specific score, that what is the risk score that it contains. So this is a very good practice that can be followed, though I'm still saying I'm not recommending any solution of the third party, but just would like to highlight it there. And there are so many third party vendors and applications that do provide those much of insightness.
Correct, correct. Pradyumna.
Okay, so we talked about DAST and SAST, and now we are going to talk about a very sensitive aspect of the open source development and the open source scan, right? We all know whenever we do the application development, we use so much of the open source codes and the libraries which are available, and I'll give you a very quick example as well. So we all have heard the log4j and the respective vulnerability which was identified, right? It was identified because people were using some open source libraries at the time, right? Which was having a 0 day, which was having that exploitability available, so that somebody can exploit and get that information breach or leakage to having a remote code execution, right? We will talk that in a later aspect, but I would like to just explain a little bit of the open source scan. So open source scan is also very important to perform your software composition analysis. Or software composition analysis is nothing, it is just a libraries that you are using of your overall source code development, because we all know bit buckets, and we all know all developers do have access, though we should restrict developers to having all third party and open source libraries to use as less as possible. But the libraries should always be used within the organization after the approval. So let's suppose if an organization supposed to use a Python, right, a Python supported version, I'm giving a rough example, 3.x, right? So this Python 3.x supposed to be approved by the respective security management, and where the code is being, or the repository management where the code is being to be stored, and it is being scanned on the compliance or the update standpoint of it. So it is very important whenever whenever the developer is developing any component, and they are developing using open source code libraries, because we are using the third party open source code libraries, it's deemed important to make sure those are also being updated at all the time, right? So open source libraries cannot be, or the source code cannot be left behind without testing, because we have seen in many of the development in the different location, we have seen people are using third party libraries or the open source libraries. So versioning of it is also important that we talk about at the later stage. But yes, open source code as scan is something which gives us the vulnerability which is residing into the system or the application, which needs to be patched on immediate basis, right? So, and there are so many vulnerability scanners, open source vulnerability scanners available, which can give you what the latest source code repository or the library which is available for a specific open source software to be used, so that you can keep your software updated at that time. So the importance of the security, for open source component is just to understand as open source code software is developed by many developers, right? And when I said many developers, it is in the different location with a varying level of coding and security experts too. And when it is available to everyone, which means it is easily accessible and exploitable. Somebody using a vulnerable library in a specific code, and knows that this is not up to the mark or updated as per the compliance method, should right forward stop using that and look into the compliance standard of the arbitrary, where that is being maintained, it is always being kept and secure, right? Though sometimes it is very difficult to enforce the security around it, because you do have the library and component management where you can have all those library updated. But at the same time, you should not only rely on the libraries or the arbitrary where the libraries are being kept, we also need to scan our developed application against open source libraries too, which can explicit give us the result, which can be identified using open source techniques and standard altogether. And in open source, we have seen, like we have seen, and we already discussed that the 0 day, right? 0 day is something which was recently also identified, and we all are pretty much aware of it. Log4j, it actually cancelled few of the security professional a long leave. People were on a long leave, they were held back, and they were asked to the company on an immediate basis, right? So we should understand, right, that what the implicit and what is exactly it is required at the time when we are using the open source libraries of it. And definitely when the 0 day vulnerability is being identified, though we have less controls at that time, because we do not know what that 0 day is all about. When it is open into the wild, it means 0 day means you don't have any production protection. That is what it means, a 0 day, right? None of the security tools, none of your engines do have signatures to stop it, and the patch is not readily available yet, and you have 0 day to implement that patch. Let's suppose a 0 day is identified, it means you have 0 day to implement that patch. So the time that it will take to patch you or to enhance your security, you may definitely the organization may lose the very important and very crucial data which is being used by the third party or your customer clients and the different agencies altogether, right? So like I will discuss little bit more on the open source and the log4j in a use case in a later or in a different slide, because we do have a specific section on a 0 day where we will see more into it. But before we go into it, it is very important for our operating system, because operating systems are nothing, they are just a container, right? They are just an environment which is being used for application to be run. So we cannot leave those operating system to be unpatched. It is very important for us to understand our operating system, whether it is Windows, Linux, whatever operating system that is being used to host that application, should always be patched with the recent security patches and updated, right? So you always use the environment which is stable and having a support available by the service provider. So just can give you an example. If you're using a Windows server for hosting an application which is 2008, that is something which is not being supported by the Microsoft, which means Microsoft says if any of the security issue gets identified, we cannot provide you the security patch or the hot fixes for it. You may have the extended support, some organization may have the extended support, but I believe that is also being on end-to-end customer basis, right? But it will also not guarantee all the security risk and patches will be delivered to the Microsoft customer or not. So very important to have your operating system scans as well. And it is not about only operating system, it is whatever instances that you are using your databases, whether it is where it is hosted, the containers where you are using it, your whole environment where those applications is being residing and having a part of your infrastructure that's supposed to be scanned for the well-known security risk. You can think of any of the network scan tool which gives you the vulnerability of the network which can be exploited, right? Using some old TLS version in the application 2 can also exploit at some level of data exploitation or the sensitive information exposure as well, right? So, like I said, this is nothing but just a component of your environment or the overall physical environment check. That is a hosting and hardware scans. And it gives you the four insightness of the configuration where your operating system is lies. There is a benchmarks which is available from the various standard and the security practices which can be followed by, right? We have CIS benchmarks that you can follow to safeguard, to configure your the containers, to configure your infrastructure, to configure your hardwares where you are going to where are you going to build or use that application. So it's equally important to harden, it is equally important to safeguard that area too. Similarly, we have seen a lot more application these days are moving to the cloud. So cloud configuration and the cloud compliances is also the major aspect, right? So we cannot leave cloud behind it, right? So any of the AWS services that we use, we always have an account, and an account, there is a Lambda, there is EC2, there is S3 bucket. We do have so many of the native services which is available, and the services which is available supposed to be scanned for the respective vulnerabilities, because it is not only that respective application, it is all together which makes this application vulnerable. So having those security tightened there will safeguard you or the organization full in total. Okay, so I'm quickly moving to the web penetration testing, and I will spend a little more time there because this is a very key aspect here. Web application penetration testing, actually works by using manual or automated penetration tester to identify any vulnerabilities, right? Security flaws or threats in a web application. The test involves using implementation any of the known malicious presentations or penetration attacks onto the application, right? Which means and the penetration tester can exhibit or fabricate attack and environments from an attacker's perspective, right? So let's think of a way that if attacker can get and breach into the system, how far it can go, right? What are the exploitability available which the attacker can go in deep, and how much that he can penetrate the system altogether, right? So this is all about finding those security vulnerability across the entire application which is being developed by, be it whether it is a source code, a database, backend network. So throughout the activity and the component which takes off the web application security penetration testing, right? So So just giving you a quick deep. Let's suppose we do have an application, and how does this cycle works, right? So very first there are 5 steps which basically works for web application penetration testing, and the first step, which is the application and reconnaissance, where it actually defines the goal, right? Which we can also understand as the information gathering, which is a very important part. If you have to perform any of the assessment, it is important to understand what is our scope, what is the application, what are the rationale behind it, right? What is our objectivity to perform that activity. Then having that reconnaissance and the information available, we're going to have the vulnerability identification, whether it is automated and manual. We have seen the various scanning tools or the scanning techniques, which in our previous slide, where automated or manual scanning can be performed to find the weaknesses, or to the available issues or the weaknesses which can be exploited or which can be combined to get into a threat vector. So this is just identifying that vulnerability. It could be anything, right? It could be FTP port which is open and up and running on your application. It could be the proper sanitization which was not done on your application. It is the deprecated TLS version that the application has been using. So this is all kind of the vulnerability identification this phase does. Then the next step and the next phase comes is the gaining the access, which is exploiting the vulnerability. So with all these information, right, just think of an attacker perspective. Though this is, I am explaining you moreover from the internal or external web penetration testing, which is an authenticated web of penetration testing. But just think of, if you get all that information as an external or the hacker or attacker perspective, and after gaining the access, what you can exploit, right? So those exploitations supposed to be understand and supposed to be assessed. So when the exploitation happens, right? So basically the penetration tester does the POC, they do the proof of concept, they go deep into the system, but the objective is not to hindrance the production, right? There is a difference between somebody is doing it as a white hat or somebody is doing it as a black hat or as an attacker. So somebody sitting in doing the legitimate penetration testing will always give the management an insight that what are the controls tightly implemented. Still the team was able to penetrate into the application on the network to find the vulnerability to get it exploited. So this is just for doing the POC, not for performing or making any changes into the production. But think of as a attacker perspective, they will not leave that behind. They're definitely going to exploit the issues or the vulnerability which is left behind. So after gaining the access, what attacker or what the hacker does, they actually persistence their presence. What they do, they make their availability, they make their presence as a legitimate application or the resource presence. You can think of an application called explorer.exe, which runs your explorer to your windows. They bind that specific threat vector, or they bind that code injection to the explorer.exe to make it legitimate resource to be used. So whenever they would like to use it, so persistent is whenever they would like to use it by the remote code execution, and by next time they can come and they can do the same time of system and information privilege at that time. And so till this fourth, if you will see at the attacker standpoint, they stops there because they maintain the access, and they get what we need. But for security professionals, there is a fifth step, which is analysis and WAF configuration. WAF is nothing but this is just a web application firewall, right? So web application firewall is something which can protect, right? Which works as an protection to interface whatever the learning that an internal penetration tester got by this exercise. You can have that setting enabled, and you can stop that access to be happen, which is breaching by some any threat actor or threat attack vector, right? So this is analysis, and the web application configuration can give the configuration settings as well as the information that how you can safeguard and how you can protect that information. So internal penetration testing is usually done after completing an external penetration testing. So they both run parallel, internal penetration testing as well as external penetration testing, because this from external, you will see what are external threat and attack vectors which can make see or go into your application deep. But definitely when somebody is hitting inside and having those vulnerability exploited, it is also equally important to understand the internal web application penetration testing too. So this is a very wide subject. I'm not going to go much into detail because it has so many components under it. But just an overall practice, this is being task is being called about, which is being performed by the red team. You might have heard the red team who performs other network penetration testing too. And under the red team, there is a web penetration testers too, who challenge the control which is being implemented by the blue team. So blue teams are the one that you can call off people who are from the SOC, who is implementing, the endpoint production, the network security controls, the monitoring part of it, right? So whatever control is being implemented by the blue team, uh, this penetration testing team, web penetration testing team, or the red team, uh, bypass those control and provide the use case as well as the POC to the management or the respective business that here is, the loophole that's supposed to be fixed. Okay.
Fine. Thanks, Freddy. I have a query here. How comprehensive red teaming, scenarios can be finalized, which will be, maybe third-party auditor comes and audits. There will be logical, reasoning behind what all scenarios picked by third-party, this red teaming team of ours, or maybe third-party we have engaged, maybe some small organizations, engaging third parties to do it annually or in some frequency.
Yes. Good question, Saurabh. Yes. So third-party analysis is equally important because that gives you, third eye view. When I say third eye view, is something that somebody is, professional. And when I said professional, it doesn't mean our internal, red team is not that professional, but they are consultants, right? They are doing the same kind of a penetration testing for the other organizations too. So they may be aware of few issues that you see within an organization. You may categorize few issue as low, right? But whenever you are having the third party penetration testing hit on you, you will see those issues has been now classified as medium, right? So this is and there might be a possibility you see some new issues which is being identified the third party web application penetration testers too. So this is very important. It's not only that you require a red team internal, you should also have the third party penetration testers too, because those are the reports which you also supposed to provide in your SOC too. And we have so many other compliances, right? And this is part of those governance and compliances requirement as well, that you supposed to undergo the third party auditing and the third party penetration testing as well. So this is a combinations of internal as well as the external testing.
Yeah, my query was actually specific to the scenarios picked by the red team or the third parties. So that scenarios or the workflows they have chosen to perform the PT on these cases, how that can be logically reasoned, or somebody, maybe that team can decide that, or solely somebody else also review that. Okay, if the particular cases were picked up appropriately, because this is something, auditors or anyone can contest that proper reasoning or appropriate cases were not taken or adopted at the time of these exercises. So who should decide actually, who for the
So
comprehensiveness?
yes, so for the comprehensiveness, like I said, this has been governed, right? This is being governed by your CISO's organization, right? This is the responsibility of the CISO to make all the assessment ready, and the proper team is having all uh, the exquisite, whether it is the respective training is required, or if there is any kind of a business need which is required at the time of penetration testing. I think if I'm getting your question right, you are asking if something is being unattended or not being identified at the time of assessment, what is the rationale behind, and who's going to see that what you have done, what you have not done, right? Is that the question sort of that you are asking?
Ye- Yeah, it's partially correct. The thing is, uh, any approach which security teams are, adopting, that can be questioned by internal auditor or third-party auditors. That okay, you have picked up these scenarios, but how did you conclude if these scenarios are sufficient enough to? perform the test,
Okay,
right? Yeah.
good point, Saurabh. So, so like I said, security, cannot be give you 100% of the assurance, right? So, all thumb rule, 100% security, is an ideal condition, right? Because each and every day you get to know new threats and vulnerabilities are being identified, right? And different individuals with the different skills, maybe the new individuals with the different skills may have a different insight altogether, right? So there is a quite possibility that you see few issues are not being reflected internally and being reflected at the external. That's what I said. It is the beauty when you have that external insight from a third party. It could be any of the consulting firm which gives you same set of standards of doing the penetration testing, because they do have seen the other business and their specific logics, right? And what are the best industries practices which has been baked in into it. And whenever audit comes in, it is not only the internal penetration testing report suffice, it is also the same external penetration testing report also be suffice with the combinations of all other scanning and all other vulnerability management specific reports and dashboard which needs to be provided. That other than this, what all we do, so definitely this is being governed within the organization under the threat and vulnerability management portfolio.
Yeah, rightly said, Pradyumna. That's why the defense in depth or the compensating control plays a role. And security only can delay the exploitation can happen, right? It cannot prevent 100%. You rightly said. It only can delay the exploitation which can happen. Fine, we can
Absolutely.
move on, and we have a time check also. I believe 25 minutes left for the session, so you can dictate
I,
accordingly.
I, I,
Yeah,
I will surely, take my pace accordingly then, right?
sure.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Uh, I will not take much time on this 0 day because I think we already talked much on it. Like we see, the 0 day is something that when it's being identified, like I already, talked about, it is something you have 0 day to patch any of the issues which is being which is was out in the wild to be exploited, right? So the best practice to defense against the 0 day is to deploy a WAF. This is definitely, and when I said best practices, it doesn't mean this is only the practices, and this will safeguard you 100%. What Saurabh has also said, this does not provide you 100%, but this will give you all the insightness and all the other component where you can input and strengthen your security portion and the overall posture out of it, right? So implementing a WAF, which is a web application firewall, having your application isolated, right? So if you are having your application isolated on the various environment, it is not something you are having your application sitting on a shared infra, right? So let's suppose an application which is running vulnerable, sitting on a shared infra where few of the more applications are being hosted, right? So it's supposed to be isolated. And when at the time of, especially when you have identified this in an application which is being identified as a known 0 day attack, you can isolate that application. And maybe basically on the organization approach, if you can segregate by the non vulnerable application to a different infrastructure or from the different instances, or you can have the isolation build for that application altogether. So this is organization to organization call, right? Patch management is something which plays a very major role here. So patching, delaying in patch will definitely cost a company in hefty penalty and the losses, right? So patch management has to be up there from a very first day when there is a patch available, whether there is a 0 day, then we get to know the patch is available, supposed to be patched. So patch management supposed to enforce throughout the patches, whether it is an application, Windows, network, operating system, right? All patches should be enforced at the times or at the right time, right? So these all practices will give you four insightness, and not I will not say too much about it, but one component I will focus a little much is a 0 day trust. So nowadays you have heard so much on the 0 day, or I'm sorry, not 0 day, it's a zero trust, right? So zero trust is nothing. This is just don't trust anyone, right? Even if that specific request comes from a trusted or an authenticated user, don't trust them. Either segregate and isolate the zones specifically. You can have your zones available, for a zero-day trust. You can build your zero-day trust, which has need to know basis access. So if you need to require a one access for an application parameter, you should only have access to it. Other than that, it should not have any of the connection or the parameter to be used it for, right? So uh, these are the basic fundamentals that you can implement, to safeguard your application against zero-day attacks. I have, other, aspect too, but in the interest of time, I will quickly move to, the other slide, which will give you a little more insight of, the Log4j. I will not take much time of yours here, but yes, we'll give you a little bit of insight, right? So this is something which you have heard in while, that the Log4j attack lifecycle. So what happened in this, right? If you heard the Log4j, it was nothing but it was just a vulnerable uh, you know uh, 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 code or a binary available to be exploited at the time, which didn't had any patch, which was identified at a Log4j. So we all know what has happened, right? You can see, I can walk you through very quickly. So whenever attacker sweeps the internet to check that what are the vulnerable servers, they get the responses. You can see the responses it is sending, and it is getting the responses that, hey, these are the instances which are available, which is exposed to that specific victim server, which are running the Log4j vulnerability, right? And this is a very specific vulnerability which has been directly associated with the Apache. So Apache do share the specific update and the patches, but not at that time. So at that time, whenever this was identified, there was a zero-day. Uh, uh, the question came to the team that what's supposed to be done, right? Even what you can do. So for the any zero-day, when you don't have any signatures, when you don't have anything who can detect it, the first thing is, the basic rule is, go and check your applications whether it is being isolated, and check the component. If it is having an external component, if it is having an external interface, try to stop it. If it is having a business case or a use case for an application to be exposed internet, right? Try to stop it, or try to have or security which is being defined and which is being provided by the various other organization in the security practices too. So here what we saw, the JND I loop was a class from the vulnerable Log4j libraries, which was found to be each and every asset which was using the Log4j functionality. It was calling out that for an execution standpoint to get that vulnerability exploited, right? So that instance was very much relatable to the jar packages. Somebody was using a jar packages, which can be remediated at the time of when you are implementing a WAP. So when you are having that information, you can disable the Log4j at your WAP, which is your front end, solution, or the application and solutions too. You can disable at the Log4j. You can have your patch available. Like I said, whenever you have a patch, you have to apply the patch right forward. And there was that JNDI lookups, which was making this vulnerability exploited, that's supposed to be disabled, irrespective of whatever the business case is all about. This is something which supposed to be stopped or disabled at the time until the patch is being done, right? Because it is providing the remote code execution. Similarly, if it is having the business case of remote code base, that also supposed to be disabled at that time. So this is the very quick insight of Log4j. Now I will quickly move into logging and monitoring aspect of it.
Yeah, Pradyumna, I will take 30 second a
Yeah.
query. Whenever, so I believe this query will be of several SMEs who are maintaining security for applications or infrastructure. Whenever we come to know there is a zero day vulnerability or a vulnerability which got released, or people have get information about these, like this attack, Log4j, what three things on priority a SME is supposed to do, right, to identify, or what all three top priority things is some person supposed to do when they get the information of these kind of attacks?
Okay, so I would say this is what we talked about, Saurabh. This is something that you can do as a best practice when the zero day is being identified, deploying your WAF to be implemented. And this is specifically we are talking about the application security standpoint, right? You can certainly also whitelist. You can go for a whitelisting approach. You can go for the blacklisting approach, right? Or you can also go for the hybrid security approach. That is a very in detailed view of it, but I'm just giving you the overall component when you are implementing a WAP solution, right? You can deny all the traffic by default, if you known this application parameter which is being used, right? You can use a blacklisting, you can use a hybrid security, which is a combination of both elements, blacklisting, or the whitelisting altogether. So, like I said, and also the zero trust. So, instead of assuming everything behind the corporate firewall will save you, it is not something that it can be done, right? So the zero trust model assumes breach and verifies each request as thought it originates. So let's suppose from an open network standpoint, regardless of where the request originates or what resources it accesses, zero trust teaches, never trust anyways and always verify, right? So these are few of the components that can be enabled, that can be identified. And definitely we talked about, the patching cycle. You should have the patch management always available and to be ready to be used it for. And you should always have an antivirus and anti-malware system, which can at least give you, if it until it gets a signature, I don't think so it will give you any prompt. But if it is having any heuristics based approach, then it will give you if any remote code execution, or if your system is being taken over the remote. So this is few of the steps or the measures that you can take against the zero-day attack. Like I said, zero day is something which gives you 0 day to patch your system, but definitely all different security component in an aspect, hardening, safeguarding, uh, incrementing all those policies, again, or maybe some rigor policies against that security for a time being until you have that security patches available, will safeguard you for, in such scenarios.
Sure.
Okay, I will quickly move into logging and monitoring. Logging and monitoring is something which is very important also. So it is irrespective of whether your application is having few set of users or whatever the application log does it maintain. Logging plays an essential role of an application, right? So and beat any of the application, logging is deemed important, because we also need to log the application behavior for the specific testing standpoint, and to analysis if the application is running fine, as well as to know what applications is being what users are using that specific application, right? And what record does it contains, which provides a user access based knowledge to this application. That can also be a triggering and an alarm for your endpoint security monitoring team, which can give you, hey, this is an application which is being accessed, trying to be accessed by some users, and the access was failed at the 5 times, and their IPs and their specific access was blocked. So logging and monitoring plays a very spatial and crucial role here, right? And this is something which supposed to be enabled at the application level or access base. Like you can see, there are a few examples that you can always enable your logging. It is application logs. Application log is nothing but this is just for authentication log, the audit trail logs, and the admin activities log. Admin activities log is very important to be captured, because these are the logs which can harm the application if somebody breaks into the system with the admin privileges, right? So they can have the configuration or the things to be changed from the admin privileges and activity standpoint. So all those logs should be captured, because those are also the requirement from the other compliances and the governance as well. And then definitely, like I said, this is an umbrella, right? This is not only having an application security. You should have the infrastructure log, you should have the security log, which is an IDS, IPS, firewall, antivirus, and anti-malware, everything. So you should have that logging enabled. At least you can get that alerts generated. Some application all of the sudden seen a spike, right? When I said seen a spike, it was hitting a threshold which is being used. Somebody was trying to hit your application, as eating up all resources, right? And maybe they are just putting up a DDoS attack into it, right? So this is very important for your you know uh, security team to understand. When I say security team, it is SOC team, your security operations center team, to understand what all activities is legitimate, which we should go, and what all we need to alert to the management and even to the team that this is something which has happened, which is not in accordance to the security or to the standard and policy. Okay, patching is also, we already discussed on this, but patching is something as an overall we look into it, right? Whether it is operating system patches which is being provided by the various vendor, Microsoft, Linux, right? Whatever operating system that we use. Application vendors, that is very important to understand. If we are using any applications, right, and the party provided application which we are hosting and implementing in our application, it should have a proper patch management. You should have a proper patch plan, right? Who is doing what? Who is responsibility to be notified if some application has received a patch, right? Who's supposed to be notified? Who's supposed to test that patch, into the lower stages before it is being moved into. We have seen so many of the Microsofts and other vulnerable software patches that the company keep on pushing in our system, updating them altogether, right? So uh, these are the patches, and these are the patching management which is very important, which is supposed to be centralized managed, and definitely we cannot left behind our open source libraries as well as to network equipments that we use, because like I said, this is the umbrella of the infrastructure that we take. So everything that you can think of which we are using in an application to be built and to be run, it requires each and every pieces in terms of a patch plan ready and prepared. And at the same time, versioning is also very important, because it plays a very vital role, because versioning is something which can ensure the change made to your respective, whether it is a source code or whether it is a document application, whatever that you do was intended, right? And you always have a capability to restore it when you need it. You might have seen there's a change management which is being followed also, right? And which has a very good component and part of it. You can roll back that change too, which means you have the latest version available that you can roll it back. So always make sure the versioning is being done at the right part, at the right stage. So whenever you do have your rollback plan, whenever you would like to restore your application at a certain specific stage, it's supposed to be available to be rolled out or to be restored.
Pradyumna, I have two queries if you can quickly address those. Uh, like for small organizations with budgetary limitations, how they can, automate their versioning of the applications, and how we should prioritize the patching or mitigation of the vulnerabilities, because few of the applications or the applications are within the business facing, they're running the business, right? So to giving preference or prioritize the mitigation, taking downtime. So all those, how do you see it can be prioritized?
Yes, good question, Saurabh. Let me give a try to that. Okay, for versioning, there are the ways available, and like we know, any of the repository that we maintain, there are so many ways that we can maintain a versioning out of it. I'll not go by giving you the vendor's name or the third party solutions which are available which maintain your versioning and the solutioning, but I give you a real practical example. So let's suppose if you are using Office 365, and you are using any of your document whether it's being prepared on Word or MS PowerPoint, right? You always see, if you have enabled your OneDrive, right, it always maintain your versions, right? So you can always go and check what are the versions available when this file was developed, and what are the next available version that the file can be restored. So that is the beauty of the versioning, which can give you the power to go back into the system if something goes wrong, something went wrong, how you can recall the changes from the state where it was running absolutely fine, right? And like your second question was on the patch management. So yes, patch management is something sort of is supposed to be centralized managed, right? So there is a team, and when you said there is a small team, I think it doesn't require too much of the bandwidth of the individual. You require the right tool and the right technologies to be applied to identify those issues and to identify the right class of the patches, right? If this is the vendor provided application, you should have, like I said, you should have that a patch plan. You should have somewhere documented how the patch supposed to be received and how the patching supposed to be done, right? And for the internals, I think we all know SSEM and all the centralized managed patching we have seen. For the small scale organizations too, the patching can be maintained with a very less efforts. You don't require a very big team to manage the patches. It is right all about the right technology and the right tool, or the right approach that we use for patching the respective infrastructure or the services altogether.
Yeah, thanks, Pradyumna.
Okay, so though we don't have much of the time, but I still supposed to complete it because this is, the biggest breach that we have heard of, Equifax, right? Which has almost 148 million people data was breached. Like I told you earlier, this is something. Equifax is kind of a similar service which is being provided by the Civil core here, right? So. Uh, People out there in America, their 148 million people data were breached, or it is being published, right? So why it was happened, it was actually happened because of the negligence of the Equifax at the multiple points, allowed, which is being hacker to gain access to sensitive file. And why it has happened, it is important to understand, and you will be able to correlate with your earlier question too. The Apache Software Foundation actually published a patch to its Struts software in March 2027, right? And because of the negligence of the patch, and they very right forward said that this patch is going to be fixing the gap in the remote access, and Equifax did not apply the patch at the same time, which dispute the resolutions and the system, which leaving an access point for the hacker, right? So this is very important to understand. When you have that patching mechanism, when you have that information available, at least you should know, you should be part of the various communities, whether it is CERT or any of the community where you can get it, CWE, all of the platform that you can get the common vulnerability enumeration, or the issues, or the findings, or the well-known patches, or the vulnerabilities which out in the wild. You should know that what are the best way, or what are the patches available to be fixed it, right? So Equifax has a very huge lawsuit, I'm sorry, the lawsuit by consumers, along with investigation by the Federal Trade Commission, and they had almost like 425 million penalty that they have faced at that time. Okay, I know we have so much to continue. I'll take my pace very quickly. I will not go very detail into it. We can discuss any specific question that the team do have. So I'm gonna talk about access management because this is one of the vital area, and we know access is something which is a technique which regulates that who can access what. Especially in your application, like I said, and we already talked about it. You should have a specific access mechanism. You can also call it like access control implemented in, right? So these are the industry's known term that you see. There are the two ways that we can implement these control. It's physical and logical. Physical, we know. We can have the specific, physical control to be implemented. Nobody can go into the data centers. You do have all the physical controls available. That the biometrics, you have that permissions that only can go into the cabin, right? Then we have the logical, access controls implemented, which is, and I will focus more on the controls which are, which are being used these days in the industry, which is the role-based access control. The RBAC is the access control, as well as the rule-based access control, right? Definitely, there is also being used the attribute-based access control too. So, the role-based access control is a widely used access control mechanism that restrict access, to the resources based on the individual group that has been created to define by the business function. That what is the business function that the particular user need an access for? Maybe an engineer at level 1 required a specific role-based access. Engineer at the level 2 should have much detailed and much in-depth access, or much resources, to an application that will go a level 2. And level 3 would be having, the more or the privileged access of the system. So these are the roles which can be defined within the system. These are the roles which can be defined, within the control mechanism that you apply for access control, right? And rule based access control is nothing but this is just a security model in which the system administrator defines the rules which is governed by which is being governed by to access resource objectives, right? It could be the rules based on conditions such as time to time, or the location. And in location based rule that you have applied it for, somebody is trying to access it from a specific location, then only the access can be provided. That can also be given to the specific role based access as well. But combining these two will give you more insightness of securing your access to the application and as well to overall infrastructure. And definitely the attribute based access is definitely a methodology which manages access rights by evaluating a set of rules, whether it is a policy, relationships, using the attributes of the user. It's a system, it's environments, it's the condition, whatever you would like to apply. You can draft your attribute based rule which is required to grant any specific access at that time.
Yeah. So yeah, Pradyumna, if you can cover the governance module quickly, or you can spend, I believe, 5 more minutes.
Yes, I will be quick on the access control. I know we have a very less time, but I will be quick on the access
No, no
control.
problem. Take more 5 minutes. No issues. Yeah.
Yep, yep. So, just would like to give an overall example. This is a federated access identity management, and how do we manage, the accesses and how the applications are being accessed as for. So, the preferred method within your organization, you might have seen, we are using, the single sign-on. When I say the single sign-on, you are using into your application or even to your system, your organization portal, and it seamlessly provides you access to other of, the websites too. This is nothing. This is just a single sign-on, which is a federated access SAML 2.0, which has been provided based on the assertion markup language, which gives you the seamless access on the basis of federation, which has been provided one application to another application. It's necessarily not required your ID and passwords to go. Rather, it provides access based on the identity provider. So user go to the identity provider, and identity provider provide that access to the service provider. So single sign-on is something which is being heavily used within the organization that you might have been seen in the corporate, right? Most of the corporate are using the single sign-off or throughout their applications. Okay, we are also aware of social SSO, the SSO that we use on the Google. You logged into the Google, then you open any third-party application. It provides you sign in using Google, right? That is a social Google, social SSO, right? That is not the secure way that we use, right? Because any of the application which is having your information shared by OAuth token by the Google itself can also expose your information to the third party too. So if your one credential is, if your Google is being compromised on whatever application you had interacted and provided your access to the third party application, those all application will be at the same time will be compromised. So this is the disadvantage, if I would say, social and the SSO that I see as of now, right? Which can be mitigated at the time, but not at the large level. Enterprise SSO is nothing but thus the enterprise level of single sign-on, which provides you the software products and the same kind of a flexibility. The Twitter data breach was happened back in 2018, and that was because of their password hashing. The practice, their what they do, they do the password hashing, and they were not properly managing their password well while they are doing their password management. They were not doing it hashed well, so it was identified that it was in a clear text. That was a breach, which is a very sanity or the basic sanitization miss which has happened from that Twitter. And yes, a few of the reason that it was identified that the OAuth token, which was not getting expired at the time of somebody's changing the password of the existing session. So if you are logged into several other API or logged into several other devices, it doesn't provide you access or revoke access on the other application at that moment.
So, Pradyumna, just for a couple of seconds, like these kind of misses, which is maybe we can talk about Twitter's case. It looks like not a very big thing, which was missed, and basic issues were there. So, how somebody can ensure that he or she is aware about all these common or minimal baseline hardening things with respect to application security, or integration with the APIs, or the other aspects within the environment to avoid these misses.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And this is what I gonna, quickly cover over here in an application interface, right? So this is something whenever you are using any federated service, it is important to understand what all information that you are going to share with your third party. So if any of the application which requires your access of your SSO, it is us to decide what all information that's supposed to be shared. It's not everything that you are federating access to that application. It is always having the less and least information which can be shared by the other third party application. So having an application like I'm using the Google and trying to sign on some other third party which is on fitness, I'm just trying to log in. It provides me an access to log in with Google, right? So what it should access only my name, or maybe if wish to know my date of birth, but that is also on the base of the consent. Other than that, it should not provide any information, right? So but you might have seen an application which explicitly ask more access when you are using the OAuth token or the same authentication pattern using the SSO. So I would say don't have your multiple applications having a single login at the place if you are using it for, especially for the third party application. If you are using within the organization, that is being still controlled, but if you are using outside of the organization or for your personal use, don't use your third party API, don't use your third party application to have an interaction with your SSO tokens.
Fine. Yeah.
Okay, so then we will very quickly on the API. APIs is just nothing. This is just an intermediary, term which is used as application programming interface. If an attacker is supposed to, inject something, they injects on the basis of API, because API is something which interacts application to application, right? Which runs on a victim's browser, and that the specific script can be executed. So these days we have seen API is also is being asked by the various industries, and they are doing the API security component also, right? You might have heard so much of the terms of the REST APIs, which is the representational state of the transfer, or the SOAP API, which is a simple object access protocol. So these are nothing, but these are just a way of one is just an architecture. So SOP is a protocol which is strictly being followed for communication between client, and REST is an API which uses this architecture to use it for. However, the SOAP takes more time and more bandwidth to be implemented, but REST APIs are still quite easy, to be integrated with whatever formats and use cases that are available. Okay, LinkedIn, we all discussed. I just would like to tell you that this hack was happened because uh, the LinkedIn API was exposed and scrapped by uncovering that issue by the attacker. Okay, access control review. I'll not take much part of it, but this is something which plays a very important role. Every access supposed to be reviewed, whether it is a local administrative account, privilege account, domain access account, firewall account, the service account. Everything's supposed to be reviewed, and they should be managed by the centralized the account management as well, right? So you might have heard there is an industry known solution also available for privilege identity and access management, or you also heard privilege access management. So you should use the privilege access management to manage all such accounts and also privilege accounts, where you can have more insightness that what these accounts are all about, and how do we safeguard and how do we regulate their passwords, how we maintain their passwords. That can be done by the privilege access management part of it. And default password is something, whenever we get any of the solution, any of the third party application that we get, it also comes along with the vendor provided ID and password, right? So you should always change that third party ID, provided ID and password. And having it access reviews, you should always have your access reviews implemented at the right stage at the right time, right? You should have at least a set frequency that by when you're going to review your access, whether it is admin access, whether it is your faceless accounts access, or any of the rule based access that you get, right? So it is always required to review your access, which identifies if somebody was not in the organization or moved into the lateral movement or the vertical movement, and he or she should not have access to the attribute or the application which is being part of earlier. That also needs to be taken care by the access reviews practice. Okay, safeguarding access is nothing, but this is just having your assets is safe against the data loss prevention, the antivirus and the anti-malware. There are solution which is available. Encryption is something which is very important here, right? Because we do have our information available at rest, in transit, and in use, right? So data which is there in rest, it should be encrypted all the time. And like it will be dependent on our the data classification standard that we discussed earlier, right? And then we have encryption in transit, that whenever it's being transit, it is always secure. It is always secure by the TLS 3.0 or whatever the technology is available, right? And then in use is something, it is approach to ensure that the sensitive data is never left unsecured, right? It regardless of the life cycle of the stage, whether it is in rest, in transit, in use, sources or the locations on whether it is on-prem, cloud, and hybrid, it should always be protected and secured. This is just a environment segregation. Like we already discussed, we should have a segregation matrix or all the environments. A developer should not have access to the production the same time, these environments should have the segregation of the accesses implemented underneath, right? We might have also seen few requests. I can tell you that some application do have a business case where they would like to put up some production data into the lower environment, right? Just for testing something, right? So first, this is not a recommended approach to do it. There are various way that you can do it, but not with the production data. There are ways to scrub that data, to mask that data if somebody would like to test it in the lower stages, which has a lever, which has a lesser, controls implemented, and the data is supposed to be scrubbed, supposed to be masked before, the testing is going to be performed in the lower stages in the environment. Saurabh, just a question: Can we do the poll two in the end of the slide then?
No, we don't need the poll. I believe
Okay,
we can quickly finish in 4 or 5 minutes.
sure.
Pratham. Yeah. So you can, on a high level, you can cover the aspects. No need to go in detail. We will share the slides for members to refer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is just a standard. This is just the security standard, the software security standard which is being followed. This is a OWASP top 10. We all know that we follow, and this is just a security standard for securing code standards, which rules and guidelines used for preventing security vulnerabilities, which can affect the organization, and the security standard which actually prevents, detects, and eliminate error that could compromise the software activity. So these are the standard which supposed to be used for your application development standpoint. Okay, cloud applications. We have so much of offerings in the cloud, public, private, and the hybrid cloud. This is just a mix and match of the offering. We all know everything. It is important to understand what all services that we get from the cloud, right? If we are receiving a service which is a SaaS-based service, this is everything that the vendor is supposed to manage, right? The platform as a service is something that application and data which is being managed by the organization. So as the as is something where the virtualization servers, storage, and network, which is being managed by the provider. Rest, everything is being managed by us. So, be it any of the application which is being deployed or being used, any of the service model that you see here is in the cloud. Every aspect that we have already seen in the previous security component supposed to be equally cascaded in this requirement too, right? And these are, just a leading cloud application security risk, which we have seen in the last few years, where we have applications are being started moving to the cloud, right? These are the, misconfiguration of the application, the unauthorized access, which was happened at the time, insecure API that we already discussed, outdated firewall. We always have to update our firewalls, account jacking, and the compliance risk. So compliance could be the respective compliance which is applied to that specific development, or apply to that specific area of the component. So capital one is one of the breach which was happened, and this was happened because their S3 bucket was having access, and was being published to the internet. It has a connection where it was published to the internet, and it had, because the server side request forgery attack was implemented, and the misconfiguration of WAF lead this attack to be happen. Last is the governance part of it, but I'll put a little more. I think we already discussed this in in previous slides too. But these are the basically models that we cover generally, right? Waterfall, agile, and DevOps. So waterfall, it's very least adhere approach that somebody do and rely on. To agile is something everyone is doing a development, and they would like to test. That you can see at the every end of the code development, the testing has been done. The code has been developed, the test has been done. The code has been developed, the test has been done. This is something which is the agile methodology which is supposed to be adopted. And then again, for the DevOps, it's something when the bunch of the code which is being deployed at the time the testing supposed to be done, right? You can see the test had been done, then again it is deployed. The code test and deployed. So this is the governance model and the process model which is being followed, whether it is a waterfall, agile, or DevOps. This is being followed as a process model if you are going to maintain the services. Governance is something when you are governing a specific component of your application security, whether it is any flaw versus vulnerability, or the program that you are maintaining of your application. So just running into a security doesn't mean that you only have to run, you also have to maintain the pace out of it, right? So governance is something which provides you more shape, that what shape you should be in, and what all requirement, and what all compliance requirement also which supposed to be governed within the organization too. Okay, I guess for the third party application, we always talked, but these days organizations are focused more on the third party applications because they are quite easy and to go and use that services from, like the third party application over the SaaS. And also equally it isn't important to understand, assess the risk which that vendor persists, and we have to understand those risks and also map the same risk within our organization with our security controls, whether where we are stand or where this vendor stand if we are going to take that services. So governing from a third party application vendor services to or the third party application is also equally important, right? And definitely we talked about very much on open source libraries which is being used as an open source component. And yes, last but not least, this is the role of OWASP top 10 which is supposed to be mentioned, or be it you are managing or maintaining the SANS 25. I think this was the last slide that I have in my deck. So
Fine. Great, Pradyumna. So we have received some questions and we have covered those as well with the session. Let me check if we have any unanswered. So CPs will be allocated soon. The people who will fill the feedback forms, and for there will be some surveys also, which were, survey forms were allocated on the registered emails. Members should provide the feedbacks and fill the survey forms for us to get the feedbacks and other requirements in the survey forms we can receive. This is the information about Saka chapter. So members can use it. This information on WhatsApp number. They can do WhatsApp. They can send emails. And these are some rules which I have actually shown at the start of the session. So members can take a snapshot if they want. And the recording will also be available on the chapter's membership page of Isaka website and YouTube channel as well. You guys can subscribe that. And Pradyumna, I would like to thank you a lot for the insightful session on the application security and the landscape with respect to you have covered delightfully all the content and discussed very well. So I hope the members have enjoyed and got insight with the different aspects you have covered.
yes, yes. Thanks, Saurabh, for being a wonderful host, and to all the wonderful members who have joined this session. Really appreciate their time, that they manage their valuable time and attend this session. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for your time on this Saturday. We really appreciate of all the members. So you can be more communicative with us. And as per the new board, we are doing some announcements of the priorities as per the sessions, workshops. You will see shortly in the coming months more workshop, physical events. And you can join us on the physical events we do perform in the Central Delhi locations. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye for now.
Everyone, bye.